Have you ever driven late at night, the road stretching endlessly before you, and seen the flickering neon sign of a lonely motel? It promises rest, a safe haven from the dark. But sometimes, what waits behind those doors is a darkness far deeper than the night outside. Tonight, we're checking into two such places. These are two of the most chilling motel horror stories you'll ever hear. So lock your doors, check under the bed, and get ready. Our first story comes from a traveling salesman named Mark. He'd been on the road for 12 hours straight, his eyes heavy, fighting to stay awake. The rain was coming down in sheets, making the highway slick and dangerous. Up ahead, a sign glowed weakly through the storm. The Sleepy Hollow Inn, vacancy. It looked a little rundown, but at that point, any bed would do. He pulled into the nearly empty parking lot and hurried to the small, dimly lit office. Behind the counter was an elderly man, thin as a rail, with eyes that seemed to look right through him. "Just one night," Mark said, shaking the rain from his coat. The old man just nodded slowly, sliding a tarnished brass key across the counter. Room 7. End of the hall, he rasped, his voice like dry leaves scraping pavement. The hallway was long and smelled of dust and damp carpet. The air was unnaturally still. When Mark got to room 7, the key wouldn't turn at first. He had to jiggle it, pushing with his shoulder until the lock finally clicked open with a loud groan. The room was basic. A lumpy bed, a single wooden chair, and an old-fashioned television set. The only window looked out onto a thick patch of woods behind the motel. Mark was too tired to care. He dropped his bag, locked the door, and wedged the wooden chair under the doorknob, a habit he'd picked up from years on the road. He collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to change, and was asleep in minutes. He was dreaming of something strange, a faint scratching sound when he was jolted awake. The scratching wasn't in his dream. It was real. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from the wall, the one shared with the next room. Mark sat up, his heart pounding. It was probably just a mouse, he told himself. Old building. He lay back down, trying to ignore it. But the scratching stopped, and a new sound began. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, right on the wall next to his head. "Hello?" Mark called out, his voice trembling slightly. The tapping stopped. Silence. For a full minute, he held his breath, listening. Nothing. He was about to convince himself he de-imagined it when a voice whispered from the other side of the wall. It was low and gravelly. "I know you're in there." A cold dread washed over Mark. This wasn't a fellow guest. The voice was too close, too deliberate. "I see you," the voice whispered again, and this time it was followed by a soft, chilling chuckle. But how could they see him? It was a solid wall. Mark scrambled off the bed, his back pressed against the opposite wall, his eyes glued to the spot where the voice was coming from. He scanned the wall, searching for any crack, any hole. And then he saw it. Near the headboard, hidden in the busy pattern of the old wallpaper, was a tiny, dark pinhole. It was barely visible, but now that he knew it was there, it felt as big as a fist. Someone in the next room was watching him through that hole. Panic set in. He grabbed his phone to call the front desk, but there was no signal. Of course, he was in the middle of nowhere. His car keys were in his pocket. He had to get out. He moved silently towards the door, his eyes still fixed on that tiny, dark hole in the wall. As he reached for the chair wedged under the knob, the whispering started again. "Leaving so soon? The fun is just beginning." Mark didn't hesitate. He yanked the chair away, fumbled with the lock, and threw the door open. He didn't look back. He sprinted down the hallway, burst out into the pouring rain, and scrambled into his car. He floored it, tires squealing as he peeled out of the parking lot, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't stop driving until the sun came up and he was 100 miles away. He never found out who was in that room, but to this day, he can't sleep in a hotel without first checking every single inch of the walls. That's a terrifying thought, isn't it? The feeling of being watched when you should be safe. But sometimes the danger isn't in the next room. Sometimes it's standing right in front of you, smiling. This brings us to our second story about a young couple, Chloe and Ben. They were on a cross-country road trip, living on a tight budget and sleeping in cheap motels. One night, they found a place called the Starlight Motel. It was a classic, U-shaped motel from the 50s, complete with a buzzing neon sign of a twinkling star. The manager was a surprisingly cheerful, middle-aged woman named Betty. Betty was overly friendly, asking them all about their trip, laughing a little too loudly at their stories. She gave them a room right in the middle of the U, with a perfect view of the empty swimming pool and the office. "You kids have fun," she said, winking. "Let me know if you need anything. Anything at all." Her enthusiasm was a little strange, but they brushed it off as small-town charm. The room was clean, if a little dated. After they settled in, they decided to take a walk before turning in. As they walked past the office, they glanced in. Betty was sitting at her desk, but she wasn't doing paperwork. She was just sitting there, perfectly still, staring directly at their room. Her cheerful smile was gone, replaced by a blank, unnerving expression. When she saw them looking, her face instantly snapped back into a wide grin, and she gave them an exaggerated wave. Chloe and Ben exchanged a nervous look. It was creepy, but they tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just zoned out. They continued their walk, but the image of her blank stare stuck with them. Later that night, around 2 a.m., Chloe woke up needing a glass of water. As she got out of bed, she glanced out the window, and her blood ran cold. Betty was standing by the empty swimming pool in the exact center of the motel courtyard. She was wearing the same floral dress, and she was standing perfectly motionless, staring directly at their door. Chloe shook Ben awake, whispering for him to look. He peeked through the blinds. "What is she doing?" he whispered, his voice tight with fear. They watched for what felt like an eternity. Betty didn't move a muscle. She just stood there, a silent sentinel in the moonlight, her gaze fixed on them. They were trapped. Their car was parked right in front of the room, in our full line of sight. They spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner of the room, far from the window, listening. They heard nothing. No footsteps, no knocks. Just the suffocating silence of being watched. As dawn began to break, they risked another look. The courtyard was empty. Betty was gone. They didn't wait. They threw their stuff in their bags, crept to the door, and peered out. The coast was clear. They ran to their car and sped away, not even daring to look at the office as they passed. They drove for 2 hours in complete silence before either of them could speak. They later looked up the Starlight Motel online. They found several news articles from a few years back. The motel's previous owner, Betty's husband, had vanished without a trace. The police had questioned her, but she was never a formal suspect. The case went cold. Chloe and Ben had no doubt what happened to him. They had spent the night under the watchful eye of a psycho, wondering if they would be next to disappear at the Starlight Motel. 2 different motels, 2 terrifying encounters with the darkness that can hide behind a friendly smile or a solid wall. It makes you think, doesn't it? The next time you check into a room for the night, you might want to be a little more careful. You never know who or what is watching. Thank you so much for joining me for these chilling tales. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button and subscribe for more horror stories. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Stay safe out there, and always check your locks.